Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our second webinar for the Comeback Stronger Fund. If you just joined us, a couple of notes that are up here on the screen. We are going to be keeping all attendees muted throughout the broadcast to ensure audio quality and maintain our background noise. So please refrain from using that. All questions will be answered at the end of the webinar. We are going to periodically throughout this webinar today ask if you have questions on a specific section. So hopefully many of your questions will be answered as we do the walkthrough. So be listening carefully for specific issues that you've had that would relate to your application. And then as we ask that throughout, if you do have a question on a section we just addressed, we would ask that you put that in the question box. And as previously, this webinar is going to be available to view within 24 hours on the Comeback Stronger Fund informational website, which as you can see there is earlylearningindiana.org/comebackstronger. So for those of you who were not able to meet me last week on our webinar, I am Natalie Brake. I am the Director of Community Outreach and Engagement with Early Learning Indiana, and I am really excited about sharing this opportunity, both on behalf of Early Learning Indiana and on behalf of our funder, supported through the Lilly Endowment, Inc. Also really excited today for today's specific opportunity. I've had the privilege of sitting on both sides of grant applications before, both as an applicant as well as through the grant management system, and both seats are very hard to be in sometimes. One of the things that I have greatly appreciated when I have sat in the applicant seat is when there's an opportunity to ask questions, receive clarification, and get feedback from the funder, specifically on that grant opportunity. So I'm really excited to have a couple of my team members here today to help us go through this and to be able to answer your questions, as well as to be able to support you in creating a successful application. To that point, I'd like to go ahead and invite Emily to come on. So I'm going to invite Emily Nelson to share her webcam. Emily has an undergraduate degree in journalism and a master's in philanthropic studies from the IU Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. Prior to serving at Early Learning Indiana, she worked as an associate director of communications at a national nonprofit that was focused on increasing post-secondary graduation rates. So she really understands the connections from early learning all the way up through post-secondary education. And Emily joined Early Learning Indiana last year as the Manager of Donor Relations and Grants. And I know I can safely speak for our entire team when I say we are thrilled to have Emily on our team and to be helping Early Learning Indiana when it comes to both applying for grants as an organization and then also providing feedback to us and expert advice when it comes to things like managing our own grants. So Emily, would you like to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure, thank you, Natalie. Hi, everybody. Like Natalie said, my name is Emily. I am the Manager of Donor Relations and Grants at Early Learning Indiana. So I do some of the fundraising side of things, but I also apply for grants almost every week. So I've been through a lot of different applications and processes, and I've picked up on some tips that I'd like to share with everybody today, which hopefully will be helpful as you go through this grant application as well.
Okay, excellent. So this is the agenda for our time together here today. We are going to be doing an application walkthrough, which is going to be a step-by-step through the application process for the Comeback Stronger Fund. Dispersed within that, we're going to have some tips for grant writing that are going to be coming from our resident expert here, Emily. Once we're able to walk through the entirety of the application, we'll go over a few specific opportunities for support that are still available or will be upcoming. And then, as I said, we'll round it out with our Q&A, making sure that we are able to address your questions specific to the application process. Before we get into actually accessing the application for the Comeback Stronger Fund, we asked Emily about what she does prior to applying for a grant, and she's going to give us a few tips that may help you decide whether or not this grant is the right step for you. Go ahead, Emily.
Thanks. So yeah, before you even begin the application, I would really suggest considering, is this grant right for you, and does the purpose of the grant match what you're trying to do? So you've probably already started working through a plan to either reopen or to meet updated safety standards moving forward. And so just thinking through what will that require of your center and what will be the costs that are incurred as a result. And can those things be covered by the grant funds based on the requirements outlined? And so if yes, and if you've determined that your center meets eligibility requirements, then this grant is definitely for you. However, if you have set another goal for your center, for example, to upgrade all of the technology, that's great. I'm sure that's going to help you better serve the children and families. But this grant is meant for you to be able to sustain your operations and ensure the safety of the children at your center as a result of this pandemic. And so in that case, I would probably suggest looking for other funding opportunities that better match the purpose of your need for upgraded technology. That's not to say that goal is a bad one by any means, but it probably doesn't directly fit into the purpose of this grant. So that's just something that I would really consider before even applying. And then after that, if you do decide to go ahead and apply for the grant, just map out the specific things that you'll need funding for so you can write directly about those costs as you go through the grant application.
Okay. Thank you for those tips there, Emily. I think one of the biggest things that we want to note is that we want these eligible providers to apply for the Come Back Stronger Fund, but we really want to make sure that what we're asking is what you're asking and everything matches. All right, so if you are looking to apply to the Come Back Stronger Fund and you follow the links that are on the Come Back Stronger Fund website, this is the view that it's going to take you to. One side note, it should be your name at the top corner there instead of Natalie Brake, but obviously I took these pictures applying as if myself. If you do not already have an account that has been created through the Submittable platform, you will need to do so first and you'll be directed to do that. Then once you're able to come and you'll be logged in, it'll be your name there and you'll be able to submit. You will need to click on the blue submit button to go to the questions that are in the Come Back Stronger Fund grant application. When you do so, it's going to take you to more information specific to the Come Back Stronger Fund. There is an introduction at the beginning. It's a few paragraphs which explains the fund. This is all information that is exactly matched to the Come Back Stronger Fund website, so it should be very familiar to you, but we wanted to include it on the application itself so you're able to easily compare and understand all of the components that you will need to address. Something that you may note is that when you go back into your application, Submittable may ask you to verify information about yourself as the applicant and your account that you have done. You'll have that save address and continue, which will pop up, and then you'll be able to go to our screen. When we look at beginning your grant application for Come Back Stronger or other opportunities, there's a couple things you might want to consider. Emily, can you share with us some of the considerations you make when you look at starting your applications?
Yes, so I would highly suggest before you start writing any of your answers, go into the application online and copy all of those questions over into a Word document or a Google Doc, whatever you use. Ensure that you have all of the questions copied as well as their word counts, their word limits, and any other things that you'll have to provide. I do that with every grant that I write. It helps eliminate a lot of the stress of writing a grant because you're not actually in the application while you're drafting your answers. So you don't have to worry about those answers being saved. You can do it on your own schedule and make sure that you have everything in order on your own time. It also allows you to share your draft with some of your team members. If you want them to review and edit, it's easier to just send them that Word document or whatever you're using. And it also helps you ensure that you have gathered all of the necessary information that you need before actually going in and submitting and making sure that all of those things are in the right format. So for example, your organizational budget, you can make sure that you have that all put together and that it's in the PDF or JPEG format so that when you go in to actually submit, you can just upload that and just be done with it. I've been in an application before and I've realized that my answers are way over the word limit or that I needed to upload a document, but I didn't have it handy, which can be really stressful in the moment when you're just trying to finish up and apply. And so this method helps you get everything together beforehand so that when you actually fill out the application, you have everything together and you can just submit it. So it's not required, but I would highly recommend.
That is wonderful advice. Thank you for sharing that, Emily. I know that we've received some reaches from people who are asking questions about specific pieces, and taking those few moments at the beginning to ensure that you fully understand what you'll be submitting with your application can just take that off of everybody's mind. So once you are in the application and you're ready to begin, the first thing that is going to come up is going to be asking you for information on your application contact. Some important notes here is that Early Learning Indiana is going to be using the Submittable platform to send communications to our applicants, including some questions and notification of funding status. So that individual who submits the application will be called the point of contact, and they will receive communications. So you should be monitoring this email address. This email address is the email address connected to your account. If your account does not have the correct email address, you can go in and update your account so that it has the email address before you submit, and therefore that will be the email address we can use for this point of contact. When you submit your application, you will receive an email confirmation. It does take a few minutes to come through the system, so I would say look for that email. If you have not received that, within an hour after submitting your application, you should reach out to stronger@earlylearningindiana.org to make sure that your submission did go through and that you are receiving the confirmations. But again, wait at least an hour for that email confirmation because it typically comes through pretty fast. Also important to note here in this section is that at the end of the application, you must enter the name and title of the person who has legal signatory authority for the organization, indicating that that individual has approved for this application. This individual will be the one required to sign the grant contract should your application be approved for funding. You'll note there, now as we look at your site, or sorry, excuse me, I flipped to the wrong page on my thing because of course I did, is that you will be looking next to enter your organizational information. So this is going to be information specific to the single location that you are applying for this grant. So if you have more than one location, more than one site, which means you have more than one unique license or registration number, you must do more than one application. So you would want to put in your organization name and then the street address, city, et cetera, that is all connected to that very specific license and registration number. You're going to be asked a few more questions about your organization. This includes your EIN number, and we ask that you enter that with no dashes. It is going to ask about your status of your organization as it relates to being a tax-exempt entity. Note please that if you do check yes for this question, there will be a new question that will appear underneath it, and that will ask you for your tax-exempt entity verification, where you must upload a PDF or a JPEG that shows proof of being tax exempt. If you click no for this question, you will not be asked to provide proof of your tax exempt entity verification. Just want to make sure that's very clear so that no one looks at it later and is worried when that question does not appear for you. So if your organization is not tax exempt, you will not be asked to verify your tax exempt status. If you have any questions so far about the application fields we just reviewed, that application contact and the organizational information, and it was not answered as we went through those pieces, please go ahead and ask that question in the question box. Note that we will be answering those during the Q&A at the end of the presentation. All right, so here is a topic we have had many questions on already as we've looked to do these applications, your organizational budget. The directions that are given for the organizational budget are there on the left side of your screen. It says, we'd like for you to upload your 2019 or 2020 organizational budget. This should include income and expenses for your early learning program. And then there's a note that you can select up to 4 files to attach. It will also tell you right there if you have attached any files. So it'll say 0 files attached, or once you've attached 1 file up through 4. The reason we allow for up through 4 is in case you do need to take a picture of that with your phone. Or if you already have one pre-prepared for your organization and it's it could maybe a single file. A few tips for this one is that you can use multiple formats or software. Whatever your organization uses for yours, we would just need a PDF of that organizational budget to look at. It does not need to be adjusted for COVID-19. So if you're sharing your 2019 budget or your 2020 budget and there have been adjustments made, you don't need to adjust it. Show us what your budget plan was and we can use that. Also here to notice, if you do not already have one, you can break out your typical expenses and revenue for 1 month to share with us. And a very, very important point here, we do not want anybody choosing not to apply for the Come Back Stronger Fund if you are eligible because you're concerned about the organizational budget. So if you do need help preparing your budget, please email us at stronger@earlylearningindiana.org, and we can help connect you to some resources that may make it easier for you to be able to provide the organizational budget as we ask for it. Once you've put in your organizational budget, we'll ask you to share with us some information in a section we're calling the site narrative. This is where you're able to tell us about your program. We ask that you ensure you're giving an accurate account of your program's unique features and how you serve the children and family of your communities. There are two questions that we ask here. What is your organizational mission? And we ask you to describe your early learning program. I want you to note on the screen that there are limits to the words that you can use for those. As Emily pointed out earlier, that's one of the things you would note when you're first looking there. And I'd like to invite Emily to give us a couple of tips on how you might explain more about your unique program.
Yes, so for these narrative questions in the grant application, for all of those questions, and figuring out how really to answer those, I would refer back to the explanation within each section that the question is in to help you focus those answers. So for example, in this section, the site narrative section, the question, describe your early learning program. And the overview for this section says, tell us about your early learning program. Ideal narratives are clear and concise, giving an accurate account of your organization's unique features and how you serve the children and families of your community. So I think with a question like this, just describe your early learning program, sometimes it can be easy to kind of lose focus and answer it really broadly. I'm sure that there's a lot that you could say about your program, but answering the question based on what makes your program unique, how you serve your community's children and families, what special attention do you bring to your work, who are your community's families and children, and how do you ensure that your program is helping them live better lives. I think really focusing on those things that were touched on in that little explanation in that section will really help you better answer that question within that word limit. And again, note those word limits are pretty short. You'll get a good feel for them once you start writing your answers, but 500 words is pretty brief, so just be sure to give those most important details in the answers that you are writing.
Those are wonderful tips, Emily. I know that you have to answer questions like this all the time about our organization as we're applying for different grants to say, tell us what you do. And it's really wonderful to hear you helping people really zone in on how do you tell us about how you are unique. So thank you for sharing those questions because I think that that gives a little bit more context to what we're asking for when we look at that. So we are going to be asking you then to look at some of the eligibility for this grant, and a few of the questions that we'll have to be able to look whether you as a provider are eligible or not are pretty cut and dry. So we ask for your childcare license or registration number, and then we do ask for verification of your childcare license or registration number. I know we've had questions come in to say, can I just take a picture of that and upload it? And the answer is absolutely yes. If you have that somewhere and you're able to take a quick picture, you can put that in as the file for your verification there. For that last question on the slide there, I'm actually going to go to our next slide because we get into it a little bit more. We're going to be asking for your current pass to quality level. And your options there are level 2, 3, and 4, because note eligible providers must be operating as a pass to quality level 3 or 4, or as a pass to quality level 2 with a recently demonstrated commitment to achieving a higher level of program quality. So if you are level 3 and 4, you're able to select those levels and you will not be asked the question then that is on the bottom of the slide right now. If you are level 2 and you select level 2 here, your program development plan field will pop up. And we ask you to upload your program development plan. So what we're looking for here is we're looking for the plan that you have established as a pass to quality level 2 to reach a higher level of quality, so to reach level 3 or 4. That commitment to achieving that higher level of quality is going to be defined by your organization's response to the Indiana Self-Assessment Tool, or ISAT, and the completion of related prerequisite trainings. So we do provide you a space here to upload up to 4 attachments to show us that plan that you've worked on. If you have any questions about that plan, that would be another one that you could reach out to Stronger at earlylearningindiana.org to clarify. We will only be looking to award Pass to Quality Level 2 providers who are able to show us that they have a recently demonstrated commitment to achieving a higher level of program quality. That is a component on our eligibility. After you've provided information around your Pass to Quality level, you will next be asked about your enrollment, as that is another component of eligibility for the Come Back Stronger Fund. Remember, enrollment data is all as of March 1, 2020. So you will be asked to provide the total number of children enrolled. Again, remember too that these are children ages 0 to 5 in your program who are enrolled as of March 1st. We will ask if your site is eligible to accept CCDF or On My Way pre-K vouchers. If you answer no, you will not be asked to tell us the number of children with those vouchers. If you answer yes, again, this is one of the questions that'll pop up and appear directly under the question about your site eligibility. And we would like for you to enter the total number of children with active CCDF or On My Way pre-K vouchers as of March 1st. Very, very important note across the bottom of the screen there. Providers may be asked to provide an enrollment roster to verify enrollment, and CCDF and On My Way pre-K numbers are also subject to audit. If there is a concern with the enrollment information you have given us or the number of children that you are claiming on CCDF or On My Way pre-K, we will be reaching out to you for further clarification in order to move you through the process of our grant application. Another key eligibility question that will come up then here. So the fund is designed to support high quality childcare for families with households income at or below 200% of the federal poverty level. And we ask you to describe how your organization serves this audience. We give you a couple components here that you could mention as ways that you serve this audience. If you are accepting CCDF funds or On My Way pre-K funds, this is a great opportunity to tell us that. We know you would have already answered it in the questions before, but give us a little bit more context about why you do that, how you do it, how you ensure that if you accept CCDF, that you are marketing your program to those families, so therefore they know that you're a good choice for them. Another way that you may show us that you are supporting high quality care for families with household incomes at or below 200% of the federal poverty level could be using a tiered tuition system or a scholarship program that's based on income within your program. Please note, because we've had this question, is that this system must have been in place prior to March 1st. This cannot be a system that you would do moving forward. We need to know that your program were serving families with this need prior to us having the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Give us specifics here when it comes to telling us what you're doing, because we need to know very, very intentionally how you're serving families at that 200% or below level. After we have looked at all of the information pertaining to your eligibility, the application is going to have a section for your grant narrative. So this is where we share a little bit more information just to ensure you understand what the grant narrative is. We tell you about the fund, the purpose of the fund again, because it specifically applies to this. And we tell you that the successful applicants are going to demonstrate how you will use your grant funds in furtherance of the purpose of this grant by serving children's children in households at or below 200% of that federal poverty level, and or operating in a low capacity area with a known shortage of Pass to Quality level 2, 3, and 4 early learning capacity. If you're not sure if you're operating in an area with a low capacity, so those known shortages, you can visit the grant website. So again, that's earlylearningindiana.org/comebackstronger. And looking at the Q&A there, be able to go through a link to the Child Care Desert Study, which identifies all of those tracks by the census tract where your specific location is and if it's in one of those low shortage areas. When you think about the purpose for these funds, then you are asked to indicate if you are requesting the full grant amount your site is eligible to receive. One of the reasons we ask this question is because we know that providers are in different circumstances right now. If you are able to safely reopen without needing the Come Back Stronger Fund or only needing a portion of what you're eligible to receive, we would ask that you only indicate that you need that portion. If you do fully need the entirety of what you're eligible to receive, indicate that there as well. And then be prepared to share with us the plan showing that you have need for that entirety of your eligible amount. If you don't remember what your eligible amount is, it's on the grant site, but I also pulled it up right here. So we would be looking if your enrollment is less than 20 children, you would be eligible to receive $2,000 with an additional $1,000 if 25% or more of the total children enrolled as of March 1st are on CCDF or On My Way Pre-K, and so on and so forth across the screen there. It's important that you are aware of what your eligible funding would be as you make your plan, because that's what you should be considering when you think of what you're requesting, the different categories you're requesting supplies for, and your ability to convey to us how you are going to be using these funds and why these are meeting a need that's not otherwise met. Next on the grant application, you will be asked to check the types of supplies that you are requesting funds to use from 5 different categories. I'd like to review those categories and the allowable expenses just to make sure that we've answered all questions around those. So the first area is equipment, supplies, and materials. And the purpose of this type of support is to replenish previously existing supplies or to offset new expenses that are required to adhere to social distancing and safely serve children and families. The allowable expenses for this one include personal protective equipment, individual learning supplies, meal preparation and packaging, and cleaning supplies. So note for all of these, they are directly connected to replenishing those supplies or offsetting the new expenses. You cannot purchase equipment, supplies, or materials that are not related to that purpose. The next category is staffing. And so what that would entail here are paying substitutes or transitional staff costs related to the accommodating of limited group sizes. And allowable expenses for this would be substitutes or temp services to cover additional classroom staffing to meet current enrollment needs, or staff costs to have someone taking temperatures at check-in, additional staff at opening, closing, or meal times. Again, if you look at that, the allowable expenses are directly connected to those transitional times or to having substitutes or temp services because you are covering additional classroom staffing. This is not allowing for paying of your typical staff that would already be there. It is very, very much connecting the type of support with the purpose of the fund. The third area is physical environments. And the purpose here for this type of support is to make short-term investments to support environmental improvements, to enable social distancing or accommodations to allow providers to safely care for children amid regulatory capacity limits. Few examples here would be ventilation equipment, temporary space rentals if you do need to break apart classrooms, and physical barriers to separate spaces. A few very important keywords on this page. First, there is short-term investments. So we are looking for things that are directly related to providing a safe environment in the short term. These are not long-term or capital investments into your program. Another place to look at that is it's specifically to allow for safely caring for children amid regulatory capacity limits. So these need to be connected to you having to break apart groups or keep groups separated, specifically during these times. The next type of support that you can request for are professional services. The purpose here being to invest in reopening planning efforts, support for family communications, highlighting safety practices, mental health supports, or other related professional services. Some examples of the allowable expenses here would be consultants to help you create a reopening or communications plan, contracting with a mental health service provider for staff, children, and our families. One of the reasons we included this is we know that there are professionals who are ready and willing and able to help our childcare providers come back stronger. If you're unsure of what it would look like for you to create one of these plans, we suggest that you use a professional service because they can help you with the communication to your families. They can help you provide mental health services to your staff with the stress for the times that we're going through, or for the children and the families so that they feel safe and secure coming back into your program. The final category or type of support that you may request for is for replacement supply. And I want to talk about this one a little bit more in depth because we've already got some questions going on around it. So the purpose of this type of funding or this type of support that you could request are for expenses related to programs expanding to serve more children, either within your existing or new locations, in response to a depletion in community supply. This could include expanding your operating hours, opening new seats, expanding to new sites, or building networks that support other providers. Examples of allowable expenses for this type of support include staffing for expanded hours, capital improvements at new locations related to licensing or registration, and startup materials for new locations. One of the important pieces when you look in here is in that first sentence where it says, in response to a depletion in community supply. You need to show us that the new seats that you are opening are directly related to a depletion in the community supply, meaning that some providers have closed down, chosen not to reopen, and there is a need right now for you as an organization to step in and provide additional seats if you are going to be requesting funding under this type. If you are requesting funding under this type, the same way that in a couple of other pieces of the application, there's another pop-up of a question. If you check mark for this one, you're going to get an additional 2 questions that will ask the number of new seats that you will be looking to create for ages 0 to 2, so for our infants and toddlers, and for ages 3 to 5 for our preschoolers and pre-Kers. Please note again that these are only new seats that you would be opening, and that you must then in your plan explain to us how these are connected both to that depletion in community supply and why you are the right provider to open these new seats. You are also going to want to give some details there as to maybe the location of your new site or how you're looking to expand. We do not anticipate that every provider will be opening up replacement supply seats, but there may be some providers that are, when they look at their plan, when you look at your plan and you see that I will be getting this amount of funding, I know that I can use a piece of it to offset some of the supplies that I need around or staffing or physical environments, but I also could apply a piece towards opening up those additional new seats within my community. If you are that provider, please make sure that you are checking for the replacement supply and that you are able to give the number of anticipated new seats for both of those age levels. If you have any questions about those types of supplies, go ahead and ask that in the question box now, and then we'll be looking to get to those as we get into the Q&A later. I know that this section is the one that we've received many emails about, so it's definitely one that everybody is looking at the specifications and trying to ensure that the plans match the purpose of the funds. If you have a very specific question to your site or your organization, we're going to ask that you go ahead and email that to stronger@earlylearningindiana.org. So the questions that you ask now should be more related to multiple sites potentially having that issue. I realized I answered some of those questions before I went to the next slide. I'm sure that has never happened to anybody on a webinar, but I'll keep these up here just in case. You want to make sure those replacement seats, again, are connected to new seats and share those details in the questions here. So are you opening new classrooms at your current location? Do you have that new location secured? And what needs to be done to make the new location operational? I get very excited when it comes to opening new seats and new opportunities for families and children within our communities. So I skipped the jump a little bit right there. After you've answered the questions around the types of supplies you're asking for your funds, you're going to be asked to answer some narrative questions about what you'll be looking to do with this plan. So first, you're going to be asked to briefly describe how the COVID-19 pandemic has negatively impacted your program. We list a couple of questions or a couple of points over here that you can hit on, but this is your opportunity to tell us about how this impacted you specifically within your community. So that may include, but not be limited to, a site being forced to close, losing of staff, losing of enrollment, incurring new expenses to operate and serve essential workers if you did stay open, and new stress created to support e-learning experiences. As a mother of 3 who are doing e-learning, I definitely understand new stress related to supporting e-learning experiences. And those of you who are trying to do e-learning within this time with any of your families, that's an opportunity to tell us what you've been doing and how you have worked on that. I know I've gotten to see some examples of some of the wonderful reaches that teachers have made to their students in the early learning field who are not able to stay within the program at this time. You're also going to be asked then how you will use the grant funds to effectively and safely continue or resume operations. We ask that you're specific here, and in a little bit, Emily's going to give us a couple of tips on how we might address some of these questions. The additional 2 questions that you're going to be asked in this section are going to be how grant funds will meet a need otherwise unmet for this site, and why this grant is so important to your organization. With these questions, what we're looking is that you understand that there are many needs for your organization right now, that you have really focused in on what is specifically needed for this grant opportunity and how you're going to meet that need. Note here that there's a difference in the word limit between some of these questions. You have a much smaller word limit for that final question there. Why is this grant so important to your organization? So you really need to take some time to think about how you're going to answer that. I'll ask Emily to jump in here then and give us some tips when you look at grant writing on how you justify your plan to use the funds.
Yes, so building off of what Natalie was just talking about and the last bit of information that I shared about just matching it within the details of the section that you're writing in. So for the grant narrative, like Natalie said, this section gives an opportunity to give more detail around what funding you need and why. So just be sure that the answers to those questions that she just shared in that section align with the funding categories that you went through and you chose. So you have checked the boxes of what funding categories you'd like, and then now this is your opportunity to really describe why and what those things are. So for example, the question, how will you use the grant funds to effectively and safely continue or resume operations? This is the place for you to explain why you picked your funding categories and to justify the purchases that you're planning to make. So what are those purchases and how will they ensure that you come back stronger and allow you to better serve vulnerable families?
So something that you just said there, Emily, reminded me that one of the things that we're looking at when you look at that plan is we do not need a piece by piece budget for how you're going to spend each of the funds. What I mean to say is that we don't need to know that you're going to be purchasing so many masks at this cost. What we need to know there is that you have a plan with those funding categories and a need for that. So I know that there's been a few providers who are very concerned that they needed to take the $3,000 they were eligible for and break it down very individually to be able to show us. We do want you to have a very solid plan and what you're doing, but it does not have to be broken down to the individual dollar, which is why we're asking that in a narrative format and limiting the amount of space that you have to write about it so that you're able to give us a concise plan without us having to micromanage every element of what you're doing. We'll note too also though that we will be asking for reports coming back and only allowable purchases based on the different types of categories or types of support will be allowed to be claimed against those. Once you've gotten to this point in the application on the submittable platform, you will come to the last field that we have, which is our signature. And it's going to tell you here that by submitting this application, you agree that information submitted is accurate. You also agree to Early Learning Indiana reviewing this application for funding consideration and using any components of your application for that purpose. If asked, you agree to provide verification or additional information. And then to submit your application, you must enter the name and title of the person who has that legal signatory authority for the organization, indicating that this individual has approved this application. And this is the individual who will be required to sign the grant contract should the application be approved for funding. Now, depending on your organization, the individual who has the signatory authority may also be the application contact, or it may be two different individuals. I know for our organization, Emily often does a lot of the legwork and submits the grants on behalf of the organization, but our legal signatory authority lies with other individuals within our organization. So when she gave the suggestion earlier of looking through the application and seeing all of the components, this is a great one to be able to take back to your team within your organization and know who you should be listing here if it's not you who is the person who is the grant contact. There's also a very important button that's going to be at the very bottom of the screen when you get to this point in your application, which says that you can submit or save your draft. One of the things that I love about our grant platform is that you are able to save your draft. I do recommend that you save your draft often. I don't know if any of you have been in this situation where you've been applying for something or looking to buy something or doing anything online and you go to submit and something has happened. We are using an online platform. We try to minimize all possible complications, but sometimes technology is not our friend. And so I would recommend that you save your draft frequently. If you've also taken Emily's advice and had all of your answers and all of your components saved on another way, it might be a little frustrating to have to go back and re-enter, but at least all of your components are there and ready to be copied and pasted where you need them to be. So you get to this point of the application and you're able to submit. We do want to give you a couple of tips before you actually push that button though. So I'm going to kick it back over to Emily to tell us about what we need to do before we submit for the Come Back Stronger Fund or any other grant applications you may want to apply these tips to.
Yes. So once you've completed your draft answers in that separate document, and before you actually put those answers into the online application and submit them, I have a few suggestions for that time period. One, once you have drafted all of your answers, I would walk away from that draft, do something else, and read it again later. It doesn't have to be an extended amount of time, but I found that taking a break from reading through it can help you come back and review it with a fresher perspective instead of just being in that draft that whole time. When you do come back to review it, just make sure that you're spell checking everything, that there are no errors, and that your sentences are clear and they make sense. Sometimes reading it out loud can make it easier to find any errors too. If you're reading it in your head, sometimes you can just skim over something pretty quickly. And then also you can ask a coworker or a team member to read it through as well. They'll obviously have a different perspective too. And then at the very end, once you're happy with those drafted answers in that separate document, again, the word counts, I would double check to make sure that all of your answers fit within those word counts. You don't want to have to cut down on your answers when you're entering them into the application and realize at that point that you've gone over the word count. I've been there, it's not very fun. You can easily check your word counts if you're in Word or Google Docs. Just highlight the section and then use the tool for the word count and it'll just tell you right there if you've gone over or not. And then after you've done all of that, you're ready to submit. If you're copying your answers over from that draft document, just be sure that you're matching the answer that you're copying over to the right question in the application. Just, one by one, be careful about that, and then you're ready to go.
Emily, I love that last suggestion. I have done that before. I will say on our side, we could usually figure it out pretty easily that you just cut and paste the wrong one, but it does make it a lot easier if the right answers are matched to the right question. So before we get into our Q&A section, I did want to take another opportunity to highlight some of the support that we have available for providers who may potentially be eligible for the Come Back Stronger Fund. We will have another webinar that'll be coming up. It's on Thursday, June 11th from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And you can register for that webinar on the Come Back Stronger Fund website at earlylearningindiana.org/comebackstronger. During that webinar, we're going to be getting into some more awardee highlights and looking at some types of support and some of the narratives around the support types that are being shared out. At that point, we will have some of our funds that have been given out to different grantees, and we want to share some of the best practices and promising practices that are coming out of the application. So looking at what is happening in Indiana right now, the best things that some providers are doing that you could potentially look to apply in your application if you had not applied yet. Would also say look for additional webinars that we'll be coming out with. That is the first, but we're also going to want to highlight some of the creative solutions that are coming from these providers in Indiana who are opening and coming back stronger. We definitely suggest that you follow us on our social networks as we'll be sharing out tips and awardee highlights. And then as we've mentioned several times throughout here, but it always stands to be mentioned again, if you have any questions or concerns, please email stronger@earlylearningindiana.org. We would much rather have the question asked before you submit and give you the ability to ensure that you are putting forth the best application possible for the Come Back Stronger Fund. A note right here too is if you already have submitted within our platform, you may have received an email from stronger@earlylearningindiana.org inviting you to attend this webinar and letting you know that after today's webinar, if you do want to request for your application to be open, because something that was addressed on this webinar, you now realize that you need to update your application to better reflect the information, the tips, or a clarification that was given on this webinar. You can email that to stronger@earlylearningindiana.org, and this will be a one-time offer. We can open up your application, allow you to correct, change, adapt, whatever it is that you are doing based off of your participation here today, and then resubmit that in order for us to be able to truly evaluate an application that is reflective of your program with the information presented today. So now that we've gotten through all of that, I'm going to put it here and say we would like to open up for questions. So if you have not already put a question into the question box and you do still have a question, I would invite you to do that now. While we are doing that, I'm going to go ahead and also invite Ryan to join us here. So we're going to keep Emily and I up on your screen, but we're going to ask Ryan to come join us. Ryan is a member of our Come Back Stronger Fund grant team, and he has many, many years of experience in grant funding. He has a background that really is looking more in the K-12 system related to schools, but he has been involved in all details of grant funding processes from creation to process breakdown to communication, and he serves as our main point of contact when it comes to maintaining all of our avenues for you to ask questions about this. So anyone who's already emailed stronger at earlylearningindiana.org has probably had some contact with Ryan. And if you haven't, you'll be getting contact from Ryan as it comes to accepting or asking questions about the fund. So Ryan, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure, Natalie. So I'm just going to dive right in. And
Excellent.
I tried to group these questions as best I could to make sure we kind of stay in the same arena or same subject matter. But right off the bat, can the grant funds be used to buy new toys for all age groups to help prevent cross-contamination?
We would look if you're talking about all age groups across the 0 to 5 age level, yes. So if you're talking about school age, then no. So we would look if you are going to be purchasing supplies, first they need to directly be connected to avoiding that cross contamination, which means we're looking for individual use items. So I know an example we've used previously are things like crayons. Crayons get used by many age levels for many purposes in an early learning program, and you may have communal crayons or communal art supplies that you typically use within your program, and you are looking instead to establish individual art supplies for your 0 to 5 age level. That would be allowable when you look at supply purchases.
Thank you. Can we use the funds to replace our tile floors or old carpeting to ensure that our children is safe and healthy for children? No, just to ensure that our program is safe and healthy for our children.
That would be one of those when we look at the kind of temporary environmental pieces. If it is something that is not going to be fully temporary, because we would not expect you to pull up the tile at some point later and put down carpet that is not sanitary, I think you have to make a very, very strong case for that. Why you are not able to have sanitary practices with the current flooring that you have, and how that will meet that need for you to be able to reopen and establish those sanitary conditions.
Under replacement supply, can creating additional seating at meal times qualify under this category? So adding additional seats to promote social distancing.
That would not qualify as replacement supply because that would not be a new opportunity to bring a new student into your program. So when we talk about replacement supply, what we're looking at is my program typically serves, I'll say 50 students. That's our typical enrollment. That's what we have allotted. That's what we have space to do. However, because there's been a depletion in community supply, because I know that there's 3 providers in my local community who are not planning to reopen, or who are struggling to, and it makes sense for my organization to open up an additional location or an additional classroom at my location. So now I'm going to move from serving my typical 50 for enrollment to serving 75, because I'm going to open up 2 additional classrooms or 3 additional classrooms, depending on the ages and the regulations and those classroom sizes, at a new location that I've secured. So opening additional seats for mealtime would not be under that category. However, I say that to say opening up additional space for mealtime would very easily be under a few of the other categories if you looked at it. If you are needing supplies to create separation between those groups, or for you to be able to, we typically sit at tables that are really close and we need additional tables to move them apart, that would be allowable there.
Can we use funds to purchase a commercial dishwasher in order to disinfect dishware as well as toys?
Mhm. I would say the answer for that, I think, is the same one for the floor. You need
Okay.
to make a case that shows that you're not able to safely operate with new regulations or new safety constraints with the current equipment.
And then the final one around the use of funds, then we'll jump to another category. Can we use the funds to purchase heavy duty disinfecting equipment like the Halo system, which costs roughly around $10,000?
I think that would be allowable, but I think that that would be something that you would need to consider the use of for your program. Does your program warrant the need of that type of a system? If you are a smaller program, or if you are a program that already has many of the components in place, if you stayed open and you're already cleaning and disinfecting in a way that makes sense for you to do, is that the best use of these funds for you? If the answer is yes, that would be something that's allowable. If the answer is no, then I would challenge you to think about other aspects of opening in a safe and secure manner that you could apply this funding towards.
We're going to move now to the organizational budget. So what
Excellent.
exactly should be included in the organizational budget? Like what type of line items are we looking for, etc.
Okay, organizational budget is one of my favorite topics. I know Emily often has to present our organizational budget when she's looking to apply for grants. So I want to reiterate first that if your organization already has accounting software, already uses something where you have an organizational budget from 2019 or 2020 that you're able to easily share, whatever format you are using, we are able to take a look at. If you don't have one and you need assistance, definitely reach out to us via email because we can connect you with other agencies or organizations that can support you in putting together an organizational budget for this opportunity, but also for other opportunities you may want to apply for that could also request an organizational budget. If you do not have either of those options, we need to know where your revenue and your expenses are coming from and going for your early learning program specifically. So looking at what you do for the month, where is your revenue coming from? Are you getting CCDF? Are you getting On My Way Pre-K? Do you have private pay families? Are you supported by any local businesses or churches? Where are the funds coming in that are supporting your program? And then where are they going out to? What are some of your typical expenses? What are you using for any of your utilities related to your early learning program? Um, I've got to assume you're feeding these kids a couple of times a day. If they're anything like mine when they were that age, they eat a lot. Very picky with what they're eating, but a lot of it. So where's the food budget coming from? Supply budget, those types of major categories. What we're really looking for in an organizational budget is that you are a provider who understands their own budget and is likely to continue operating in an effective manner within our communities.
And I believe we would be looking for more on this, but I would like for you to verify, is an income statement acceptable for an organizational budget?
For that one, then what I would ask is that you specifically email stronger@earlylearningindiana.org, attach the document that you're considering uploading, and we can take a quick look to see if that would be something that we would likely have questions on.
Okay. And just to clarify as well, so the organizational budget is for the use of money received. We're not looking for the way your grant funds will actually be utilized. This is
That is
just,
correct. So it is not a grant budget. This is an organizational budget. We need to see your early learning program reflected in there, but these would be your typical revenue and expenses anticipated either for 2020 or as you had it set for 2019 for your early learning program. What we would not want to see in your organizational budget is a breakdown of how you're planning to use the funds that you may receive should you be funded through the Come Back Stronger grant. Instead, what we'd be looking for those to be reflective within those narratives for the individual sections that you've checked that I need supports of this type, this type, this type. Here's my plan to use them. That's where you would need to include some of those details. Again, we do not need an individual line by line budget. We need to know the categories you anticipate using and the plan to use funds within those categories.
would your tax information, your filing of your taxes work for an organizational budget?
It would depend on what you were looking to submit there. I would say the same thing for that one is if you would like to send it to or stronger@earlylearningindiana.org, we could check. We would need to be able to see something that had both expenses and revenue at that point.
Okay. Does the grant, so we're going to switch over just a little bit.
Okay.
Does the grant allow for administrative costs to help support the grant?
That is not one of the categories that we would look for allowable funding. However, if you are looking to contract supports for that and it is directly related to creating a plan to reopen, related to communications around reopening to families or internal to your staff, or it's related to those mental health services, that would be allowable under the professional services. But a flat administrative component is not.
Okay. We are a level 3 Path to Quality program, and we are set up to receive CCDF vouchers, but currently do not have any students receiving either assistance program. Would this make us ineligible?
That is a great question, and congratulations on being Path to Quality Level 3. I know that's an achievement for our programs within Indiana. I would say that you are eligible if you are serving families that are at that 200% federal poverty level or below. So what you would need to do is on your application, you would need to indicate that you are eligible to receive CCDF and or On My Way Pre-K, that you are claiming 0 students enrolled as of March 1st. And then that narrative question where it asks you to explain how you're serving families under that 200% of federal poverty level, you need to explain what other pieces you have in place that are serving families. If you don't feel like you have a really strong case that you are serving families under that 200% federal poverty level, I would direct you back to Emily's tips at the beginning to decide, is this the right grant opportunity to apply for you to apply to? If it's not, then it may not be the best choice for your organization. That is a key component to eligibility, is that you're able to justify that your program is serving the needs of families who are at that 200% federal poverty level or below. So make sure that you can make the case in that question.
Where would I include the count for CCF children from the last week of March through mid-May?
You do not need to include counts for CCDF eligible children for any dates other than as of March 1st. So if there were any changes in it after March 1st, you would not need to include that. We are only looking for your enrollment information, so the total number of children enrolled, and then if you are eligible to receive On My Way Pre-K or CCDF, the total number of children enrolled who are receiving funding through those two sources.
Okay.
I actually do have something to add to that, though. If the point in that question is that you are increasing the number of CCDF children in that time period, that can be something that you might want to mention in one of those narrative questions about how you're feeling in need right now, because that may indicate that you're serving more children who may not have other options at this point. So it wouldn't go in the counts like Natalie said, but it may be part of a narrative if that's kind of what you're asking in that question.
Yeah. And Emily, that's a great point. The narratives are your opportunity to tell us what your program is doing that is unique to you. So if there are any questions where you want to include something in the counts, but you can't really figure out how to do that, the narrative is your place to tell us any of those pieces that truly show that you are serving a need within your communities that may be different than other providers in your community. Thank you, Emily.
And someone else have a question around the use of funds. Can funds be used to hiring a cleaning company to clean and disinfect the building periodically?
Yes, that would be an absolute yes. I think that what you would need to look at, though, is when you're giving your narrative, explain why this is different than your typical cleaning process, because we would expect, if you are providing care for early learners, that you already have some processes in place for cleaning. So if you're going to be contracting someone whereas you previously were not, make the case for why you need this now to open up safely when you look at the current conditions.
Give me one, so we're going to do just a couple more. Can we apply for essential expenses that we have already incurred? So they have already utilized the funds to prepare for COVID-19 and their reopening.
That is a great question, and one that I'm glad that came up. We would look for you only to be able to use these funds as of the moment contracts are signed and moving forward. So if you were already able to use funds for purposes towards this, what I would say is look at the allowable funds. That's where we have that great question of, do you need the full amount that you are eligible for? Because if you don't need the full amount in order to reopen safely, we would ask that you limit it to the amount that you do need for the needs that are not already currently met. That would be a need that has already been met by your program. And so that question 2 there, where it asks about how are these funds serving a need that has not been met, you have to be able to make the case and show us that these funds are needed for this specific purpose.
The final question, and then we'll turn it over for closing. If an application is not funded in this round, in the round it is submitted, would it be reconsidered in a later grant funding cycle?
We would be looking that once you receive a denial notice, if you do receive a denial notice for us, that would be the end of your journey through the Come Back Stronger Fund grant. So if we do have questions, we talked about we may reach out to you for enrollment, for eligibility. If we reach out to you with a question, that is not the same as a denial. That's wanting more information in order to inform our decision as you move through the evaluation process. But once an individual site is denied, that is the final answer when it comes to funding through this opportunity.
And just one other, will you please touch on if individuals have already submitted their application and they would like to have us reopen that. Can you please go over that time frame with everyone again?
Yes. So what we'd be looking at doing is you would need to email stronger@earlylearningindiana.org and ask for your application to be reopened. For the sake of my friend and coworker Ryan, who's going to be receiving those emails, please indicate both your name and your application title, which
Mhm.
is the unique number that has been attached to your application. You're able to see that if you go in to view your submissions, and let him know that you were on the webinar, and based on information received on the webinar, you are asking for your application to be opened and be able to edit it. Once you have edited your application, you will need to resubmit, and we will be going off of that submission date when you resubmitted in order for you to be put into our application process. So if you do realize now that you've received the information from this webinar that there are adjustments that need to be made in your application, please email Ryan as soon as possible, and he's going to open that back up for you.
Thank you. I'll let you close this, Natalie.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, I'm going to move just to our last slide here because it does show the additional information. So we want to thank you for joining us today for our application walkthrough. I know it was very heavy on the screenshots and very specific details when it comes to the application, but our goal for today was to ensure that we were able to share that detailed information and really make sure that if there is any eligible provider in Indiana who wants to apply for the Come Back Stronger Fund, that you can feel encouraged and empowered to do this application. So consider all the information you heard today about the different questions that we're going to be asking. Take and apply the tips that Emily gave to you to improve your application for this specific fund, but also to consider as you apply for other funding opportunities, either within our state, locally, nationally. And then, as we've mentioned several times, please do not forget, if you have any questions at all with this process, reach out to us. We'd like to know if there are any barriers towards your program applying if you are eligible. And that email is right there on the bottom of the screen, but I'll say it one more time. It's stronger@earlylearningindiana.org. We want to hear from you and we want to see your applications. So thank you and have a great day.